to order. Welcome everybody to our, I think our 25th meeting of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources. And again, thank you everybody for the patience. Technical problems sometimes occur, and today was an example of that. So we're going to jump right in. I just should let everybody know that I was going to stop a few minutes before 3 because we have one or two very quick housekeeping items we have to deal with before the meeting ends to prepare for our meeting on Monday. But in the absence of any strenuous objections, I might just go a little bit beyond 3 o'clock to do that, and because we're starting a bit late. So jumping in then, I want to welcome our panels of witnesses. We have 6 witness groups today, which is fantastic. The process, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, each set of witnesses will get up to 5 minutes to make opening remarks. Once all of the opening remarks have been completed, we'll then open the floor to questions from members. You are welcome to and encouraged to speak in either official language. You have translation services available to you. And it requires a little bit of patience doing meetings virtually. Try not to speak over others when they're talking. There's a lot of people in this meeting, and I will do my very best to get names right today because there seems to be a lot of identity appropriation going on before the start of the meeting. But I will try to work around that and as best I can not call on anybody incorrectly. So I will start then at the top of our agenda. Appearing today as an individual, I'd like to welcome Dr. Amit Kumar. Professor, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, members of Parliament and everybody in the audience. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on the challenges and opportunities for biofuel industry in Canada and the life cycle greenhouse gas, that is GHG emissions of biofuels. My name is Amit Kumar. I lead a large research program in energy environmental systems engineering at the University of Alberta, and I'm an energy engineer by training. My comments today will be focused on the use of lignocellulosic biomass for the production of fuels and chemicals and its potential to significantly reduce GHG emissions in Canada. I'll also focus my remarks on the potential to integrate our energy industry with the forest industry, the agriculture industry, and municipalities. I'll also talk about how this integration provides an opportunity to make significant contributions to Canada's net zero emission target by 2050. My research group work includes assessing the cost and environmental footprint of energy pathways, including bioenergy and biofuel pathways, with a focus on GHG emissions in a product's life cycle. That is the entire chain from biomass production, processing, transportation, and conversion to the end use. We also assess optimal locations of biomass and waste conversion processing facilities, taking into account not only biomass availability, but also the available infrastructure and municipal guidelines. We also work in the area of thermochemical conversion of biomass gasification and pyrolysis to produce liquid fuels. To look at biomass feedstocks are generally categorized based on their source. So for instance, agricultural biomass, forest biomass, and waste biomass. Agricultural biomass includes grains, wheat, barley, canola, straw, corn, stover, and energy crops. Forest biomass includes whole tree biomass, logging residues, mill residues, trees killed by insects like mountain pine beetle, and hybrid species, for instance, willow and hybrid poplar. Waste biomass includes animal waste like manure and municipal solid waste. All of these are available in large quantities in Canada. Today, most commercial scale biofuel production uses grains. The production of bioenergy for heat and power uses mill residues, which are mostly spoken for. In my view, there is a significant opportunity to use lignocellulosic biomass, that is straw, forest biomass, and municipal solid waste. In Canada, the potential availability of biomass is large from both agriculture and forest biomass. Using them to produce fuels and chemicals is a key opportunity. There are several lignocellulosic biomass conversion pathways for production of fuels and chemicals, and these are at various stages of research, development, demonstration, and commercialization. These pathways are broadly in the area of thermochemical conversion, biological conversion, and include, for example, combustion, gasification, pyrolysis, hydrolysis, and saccharification and anaerobic digestion to produce biogas. My research group has evaluated several of these pathways for production of fuels and chemicals in terms of their life cycle GHG emissions and cost over several years. These pathways consider the production of a range of fuels and chemicals such as renewable diesel, bioethanol, biohydrogen, biooil, biochar, biopower, and others. The life cycle GHG emissions of bioenergy and biofuels vary with the jurisdiction where they are produced, as the inputs in each jurisdiction have different GHG footprints. In addition, the potential GHG mitigation benefits from bioenergy and biofuels or bioproduct depend on the application and their intended use. So for example, in Alberta, replacing fossil diesel with renewable diesel helps reduce the GHG footprint by 50 to 60% per unit of energy. Replacing fossil fuel-based power, for example, can mitigate GHGs by 80 to 90% compared to the fossil fuel. The location of the plant is a critical aspect of the biomass life cycle. Some key challenges the industry faces are the security of long-term biomass supply, scaling up, a uniform regulatory framework that incentivizes the development of bioenergy and biofuel, and the export demand of raw biomass feedstock from outside. The scale of processing is critical as the cost to produce biomass-based fuels and chemicals, that is dollar per liter of ethanol, dollar per ton of renewable chemicals, and dollar per megajoule of renewable gas. So these decreases as the plant size increases. So there is a size for the field and forest-based biomass at which the cost of production is lowest. This size we refer to as economic optimum size. Most of our facilities are below optimum because of the challenges I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up very, very quickly, please.
Yes. Canada could become a key player in biomass-based economy because we have a large potential for biomass and well-developed forest agriculture and energy industry. Existing infrastructure and expertise can be used to develop bioeconomy. There are opportunities to integrate biomass feedstock with the energy industries. In addition to forest and biomass, I would say municipal solid waste is a big potential in Canada. In summary, Canada has both large biomass feedstock potential and the expertise to be a leader in biomass. This would help create jobs in the forest, agriculture, and energy industry and contribute to Canada's net zero emission goal. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Doctor. And yeah, if I could ask the witnesses try to stay on the 5-minute timeline. We have a lot of presentations today, so time is precious. So next up, we have Canada Clean Fuels Inc., Mr. Freeman or Mr. Angelucci, whoever that may be, is going to provide opening remarks.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and all of the members of this committee for the opportunity to discuss with you today the cost-effective opportunity to reduce pollution through the use of biodiesel. For those not as familiar, biodiesel is a type of fuel processed from biological matter and other non-fossil fuel feedstocks and blended with diesel for use in diesel engines. 1 liter of pure 100% biodiesel, or B100, has a carbon intensity that's roughly 92% lower than 1 liter of conventional diesel fuel, and also reduces other pollutants and other criteria air contaminants by up to 100% versus diesel. As a climate change solution, biodiesel is broadly supported by both environmental organizations and farmers. Biodiesel blends ranging from B5 to B20, which means there's 5% to 20% biodiesel, are used by municipalities like Toronto, York Region, Waterloo, Guelph, Kingston, Brampton, Mississauga, as well as corporate fleets like Loblaws, Labatt, and Robert Transport. The state of Minnesota, the entire state, mandates B20 biodiesel in all diesel sold between May and October. In these jurisdictions, blends are adjusted in extreme cold temperatures to account for a higher cloud point in biodiesel. In instances that are more controlled for temperature, like shipping and underground mining, adjusting the blends are generally less necessary. So for example, we are currently supplying a pilot project in the Great Lakes that's running B100 pure biodiesel in a major shipping fleet. We also supply mines in Northern Ontario with high blend biofuels. So if this is true, why aren't more companies and municipalities using it? What stands in the way of rapid scale up in biodiesel is the price gap between biodiesel and regular diesel. Currently, that gap is about 15 cents per liter of B20, or about 75 cents for a pure liter of B100. Eliminating this delta would expand biodiesel from a relatively small segment of the economy willing to pay the premium for the social license of using a cleaner fuel to a broader market of those willing to adopt a cleaner fuel because it doesn't cost them more. It would also encourage those using a low blend to use a higher blend. As is reasonably expected, we can't expect companies to pay more for cleaner fuel when their competitors have the option not to. And that green premium can only be closed in two ways. Either accurately add the social cost of conventional fuels to the price of conventional fuels, or let's help bring down the cost of the alternatives. While the clean fuel standard may reduce this price gap over time, third-party modeling shows it's expected to take about 5 years for the CFS to have a meaningful impact in the difference. Similarly, the carbon price currently has an impact, but the price is too low on its own to prompt the market shift we need. In addition, many sectors are granted exemptions to the carbon price and therefore doesn't apply to their cost of conventional fuels anyway. Mining and shipping are two such sectors. We recommend the federal government put in place a blender's credit to eliminate the price gap between diesel and biodiesel. The credit should be limited to those using a high blend of fuel to avoid funding those who are already using a low blend and funding those who are already complying or need to comply with federal and provincial mandates. This type of credit already exists in the US and is the reason that their average blend is higher than in Canada. Based on calculations by Golder and Associates, the average cost to the government will be approximately $50 per ton based on the average price for biodiesel over the past few years. And as the price fluctuates and then the gap narrows, that price per ton or blender's credit could also reduce. There are a few initiatives in this part of the transportation sector that can achieve reductions at this price, if any, and other options would also force us into path dependency. There are significant co-benefits with biodiesel, such as the advantages of deriving much of that feedstock from domestic sources closer to where the fuel is being used. Biodiesel would be cheaper and utilize existing infrastructure, so money spent here doesn't lock us into a technology that may limit us in the future. I would like to thank you all for giving us this opportunity, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much ahead of time. Appreciate it. Okay, so next up we have Canadian Fuels Association, Mr. Bob Larocque and David Schick.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in your study of the low carbon and renewable fuels industry. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am on today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. My name is Bob Larocque, and I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Fuels Association. Also joining me today is Dave Schick, our Vice President of Western Canada. Canadian Fuels Association members provide 95% of the gasoline, diesel, marine, and aviation fuels that are used across our country every day. Our members also produce more than 25% of the current biofuel made in Canada. We represent 117,000 workers that are on the job 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at Canada's 16 refineries, more than 90 fuel terminals, and 12,000 retail sites. It would be impossible for me to be here today and not speak of the pandemic. It has taxed our healthcare system and severely impacting Canadians, especially our most vulnerable. We're very grateful to those who have put their own lives at risk, and as an essential industry, proud of our role in supporting the movement of essential workers, protective equipment, and vaccines in the battle against COVID-19. Canada can count on our sector as we look forward to the pandemic recovery. Last fall, we released our vision for the future, Driving to 2050, in which we outline how our industry can make a foundational contribution to Canada's low carbon future. We believe there are significant opportunities to advance the production and use of low carbon liquid fuels in Canada and to accelerate large-scale GHG reductions starting today using proven technologies. Governments have a key role to play in working along with industry to maximize these reductions, and we have the following recommendations. Number one, align and integrate federal and provincial policies to accelerate production and use of low carbon fuels in Canada. Currently, there is an opportunity to collaborate with provincial governments to align, enhance, and build on strategies or frameworks for low carbon fuel, hydrogen, and electrification. When it comes to regulation, tax incentives, and funding programs to drive change with a common goal of reducing emissions in both the short and long term, it is important that they all share common structures, such as quantification methodologies, targets, and complementary credit generation and funding criteria. Number two, all programs and policies should support investments in production and infrastructure to ensure low carbon fuels are readily available to Canadian consumers. Canada's existing refineries, fuel terminals, and retail sites are strategic assets that can be leveraged and adapted to support expanded use of biofuels across the country. In order to meet our climate goal in timely and efficient way and maintain reliable and affordable supply of low carbon fuels, all facets of the fuel supply chain must be considered, from production to terminals and retail sites. Support for many of these smaller businesses will ensure broad availability of these low carbon products, as they will need facility upgrades to provide these products to Canadians. 3, ensure North American alignment of biofuel policies. The North American fuel market is integrated, and Canada-US biofuel policies must operate in unison. As the Canadian demand for biofuel increases, we have an opportunity to produce and use Canadian-made biofuels. Incentive programs, feedstock eligibility, and trading flexibility are all examples of measures that, if significantly different, will influence the flow of low-carbon fuels between Canada and the United States. Low-carbon liquid fuels could contribute more than 50% reduction in the transportation sector by 2050. The only way to get to net zero is to consider multiple pathways, such as ethanol, bio-based diesel, hydrogen, other advanced biofuels, as well as electrification. This will require significant investments of more than $20 to $30 billion in a strong supply chain for feedstock, production, refining, blending, and retail access. Let's all collaborate to ensure that these investments occur in Canada, and that the fuels that are produced in Canada and that consumers have access to these low carbon fuels. Our members are already working towards making these goals a reality. Recently, a new $850 million investment was announced by Shell, Suncor, and other partners to produce next-generation biofuel from wood waste and other residuals in Varennes, Quebec. Tidewater Midstream in British Columbia has also announced an investment of $250 million to produce renewable diesel that will be 80 to 90% less carbon intensive than conventional fuels. These investments are only the beginning of a made in Canada solution that would only help us achieve our net zero goal, but also create significant employment opportunities across the country. Tens of thousands of workers will be called upon during the construction phases of these new biofuels, and thousands of jobs will be created to operate these new facilities in the future. These are exciting times, and we see remarkable changes ahead for Canada's transportation system. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, Mr. Larocque. Okay, next we have from Covenant Energy, Josh Gustafson. You're on mute still.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to appear today to talk about Canada's low carbon and renewable fuels industry. As President and CEO of Covenant Energy, I am excited to be here to share our experience and provide some insight to the committee about the opportunities to ensure that Canada remains a world leader in producing low carbon and renewable fuels. Covenant Energy was founded in 2019 with the mission to become a Canadian leader in the low carbon fuel industry. We want to achieve this by producing clean, renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. To do this, Covenant Energy is developing one of the first standalone hydrogenation-derived renewable diesel facilities in Canada. Our plant will be located in southern Saskatchewan and use Canadian farmed and processed canola as the primary feedstock to create a top-quality biofuel. We estimate that our facility will produce about 325 million liters of renewable diesel annually, and we will have the capacity to produce Arctic-grade renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. We know that there is a great interest in both Arctic-grade renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, as there are continued needs from the transportation sector and for remote power generation. For Canada, having a reliable domestic supply of Arctic-grade renewable diesel is particularly important to decarbonizing our northern communities. Many of our northern and remote communities will continue to rely on diesel fuel for many more years. Covenant Energy would like to supply a drop-in alternative that will instantly decarbonize existing equipment. We also believe that sustainable aviation fuel is the way of the future for the aviation industry. We expect to hire 50 employees directly, along with 200 to 300 jobs for the design and build of the project. There will also be extensive indirect employment in the agricultural, shipping, and processing industries that will lead to economic benefits for southern Saskatchewan. Our commitment to renewable fuel production has made it possible for other companies along the supply chain to grow in southern Saskatchewan. Recently, there has been news of 3 crush facilities being expanded or opening in Saskatchewan, with potentially more to come. This is the result of projects like ours, which will help provide demand for crushing capacity. Our facility will also be using renewable hydrogen created in the process to replace about 90% of natural gas consumption. We are also exploring how to incorporate cutting-edge carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology. Currently, Covenant Energy plans to be in operations by the end of 2023, which aligns with the implementation of the clean fuel regulations. I am part of a 5th-generation Saskatchewan canola farming family with over 13,000 acres of production. Supporting renewable fuel production in Canada is something that should be done and will be beneficial to our agricultural producers, value-adding processors, and create local jobs in the green economy. Currently, the majority of canola that is grown in Canada gets exported and transformed into other products, including biofuel. Our processing plant will give us an opportunity to close the supply chain loop and provide a valuable component to the emerging low emissions fuels economy in the prairies. The current design of the plant also gives us the flexibility to double our production capacity in the future. By creating an increased local demand for canola, this helps protect our canola industry from the fluctuations felt as a result of trade disputes. Our project's success will depend on the successful implementation of the government's clean fuel regulations. While we expect domestic demand to take up most of our supply, our proposed location will be situated on a Class 1 railway, giving flexibility to access feedstock from across Canada and the US, and providing the potential to sell a finished product into the US market, helping export Canadian clean fuels to our neighbors who are also moving quickly on building similar facilities. Just 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement for a renewable diesel plant in Hastings, Nebraska, expected to produce 80 million gallons of renewable diesel annually. We want to be part of the project to help lower emissions and increase competitiveness for Canadian clean fuels. Covenant Energy strongly believes that it can help meet both current and future demands for renewable diesel in Canada. We are excited about the opportunities that our processing plant will bring to the prairies and the rest of Canada. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks very much. Okay, next up from Dow Canada, we have Scott Thurlow.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here today, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Thurlow, and I am a Senior Advisor of Government Affairs for Dow Canada. For more than 75 years, Dow has been proudly innovating in Canada. We develop basic chemicals and polymers used to make a broad range of innovative and technology-based products and solutions in the packing, industrial, infrastructure, and consumer care industries. We are one of the largest resin producers in the world. We are here today to talk about how a regulatory initiative can have multiple goals and simultaneously solve several different environmental problems. We believe that the recently proposed clean fuel regulations can do just that. It is our view that another problem that we could be addressing through the CFR is plastic waste, and this is an issue of paramount importance for our company. How a product's life cycle is defined is very complex, and it is true that fuel derived from recovered plastic will have a modest GHG improvement when contrasted to fuels derived without any recovered plastic content. But that GHG reduction is modest when compared to the overall social benefit of having reduced waste to landfill and preventing fugitive plastic waste from entering the environment. The CFR should allow for compliance credits to be generated for environmental benefits that are not as clearly tied to GHG reduction, but have other demonstrated environmental benefits, rewarding the potential for products from the pyrolysis of plastic waste, such as fuel oil or diesel, to meet the standard for compliance category 2, low carbon fuels can do just that. At Dow, we have taken many steps to address the plastic waste problem. One such example is our leadership in the development and implementation of the Hefty Energy Bag program in London, Ontario in October of 2019. The purpose of this program is to collect hard to recycle plastics at residential curbside and to divert plastic from landfills. The process could not be any easier for everyday consumers who want to do their part to create a circular economy. It offers more than 13,000 households in London with a distinguishable orange bag to discard their clean and dry plastics, which are not normally accepted in the recycling bin. This includes plastic wrap, flexible plastic reusable pouches, foam takeout containers, plastic utensils, and snack food bags. How does it work? Once the hard-to-recycle plastics are collected, our project partners allow for the use of the existing waste management infrastructure to seamlessly collect and repurpose these plastics into valuable resources. Around the world, we have used plastic waste to build roads and fuel municipal buses. That said, this committee needs to know that investments in advanced recycling facilities are difficult to secure. Chemical depolymerization is energy intensive, and that makes the recovered product very difficult to compete with virgin resin from a financial perspective. That is where the compliance pathway for the clean fuels regulations can come in. The opportunity to generate CFR credits would create an additional incentive to create this supply in Canada. In turn, this would enable a supply chain for hard-to-recycle plastics and enable an earlier transition to a circular economy for hard-to-recycle plastics. With that having been said, I do want to take a moment to discuss the Prime Minister's pledge to ban certain single-use plastics by the end of this year. A ban will not deal with the fact that our waste management processes need improvement. A ban should be the last step that a government takes as it works to deal with an issue, not the first. The minister has proposed regulations under SEPA to give life to this ban. We do not believe SEPA is the right tool for regulating plastic. We believe that this is an issue that is fundamentally an issue of waste management, a provincial responsibility. We do believe that there is a federal role through the CCME, but we do not support banning certain plastics. And we certainly don't agree with making a legal determination that plastic manufactured items are a toxic substance. The issue with plastic waste is not the plastic itself, but the behavior that allows it to leak into the environment. As a criminal law statute, SEPA is meant to punish actions, not objects. In conclusion, no one believes that plastic belongs in the natural environment. We support actions to protect the world's oceans. We think that the clean fuel regulations can help achieve that goal. I would welcome the opportunity to answer your questions on any of these vitally important issues.
Thank you very much. And last is the Quebec Forestry Industry Council, Jean-François Samaret and Louis Germain.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Donc, je me présente, je suis.
I would like to introduce myself. I am Jean-François Samaret, President and CEO of the Quebec Forest Industry Council, QFIC. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity to come discuss with you your work on low-carbon renewable fuels. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about our organization. The QFIC is the main This is the interpreter. Can you hear the interpreter on the English channel? The mic is open. Okay, it should work now. Please go ahead. So the QFIC represents the interests of softwood and hardwood sawmills, veneer mills, pulp, paper, board, and panel companies, engineered wood manufacturers, and the goods and services companies that support them. Through its expertise and that of its partners, the QFIC guides and supports its members in various issues, including those concerning the environment and energy. The forest industry, as you know, is a major engine of economic development for Canada and Quebec. In 2019, it paid $4.8 billion to governments in taxes. What that means for the federal government is $50 per cubic meter in 2019. And if you take the price of wood today, it would be over that for the federal government. So it's $100 per cubic meter in 2019 dollars for the Quebec government. So really, in 2019, the forest industry was 4.7% of Quebec's GDP and 17.4% of Quebec's exports. The work that your committee is undertaking is of great importance to us in a context where every action to fight climate change counts. The forest industry, which draws its raw material from the forest, is well placed to measure the issues represented by global warming and its current and future impacts on the forest ecosystems on which we depend. For our sector, climate change is an undeniable reality that must be addressed. In fact, we have been tackling the situation for a number of years, and our performance in this regard speaks volumes. Since 1990, GHG emissions from our industrial activities have decreased significantly. We're talking 68% in absolute terms and 60% in intensity, which is almost twice the Quebec target for 2030. Over the same period, the GHG reduction of all industrial sectors combined was 24%. So we're talking almost 3 times the average reductions generated by the forest industry. So the paper industry contributed to 3.1 million tons of CO2 reductions, and this while staying a Canadian leader in pulp and paper production here at home and worldwide. We have been aware of the fact that our industry depends on the forest for a very long time, and the forest must be protected. Canada is a leader. 40% of the forests in the world of certified forests are in Quebec. So we know that we have to keep fighting. We have to stay strong on all fronts because the energy transition is at the heart of what we do. The forestry industry is a major energy consumer. So to give you an idea of that, its electricity consumption represents 40% of Hydro-Quebec's distribution sales. We also need to use essential fossil fuels for our forestry operations. And so no less than 500 million liters of diesel are consumed yearly to operate forestry machinery and to transport wood. So despite the progress we've made so far, we know that more can be done and more must be done by us, and we are doing so. The gains in our industry have been made, and we must work even harder to ensure that we preserve the forest, and your work is very, very important at our organization. We believe that renewable fuels are the key. It is reassuring to see that your committee is analyzing this very issue. So there are 4 main issues that you must focus on. So first, the biomass, forest biomass, is subject to various forms of valuing in order to extract its energy content. So inevitably, the development of bioenergy will have an effect on the increase in demand for the various forms of biomass, which could have the effect of creating scarcity. So biofuel production must not divert material that is essential to the balance of the forest industry's ecosystem, particularly secondary and tertiary transformation. So really, it becomes important to establish a prioritization of uses in order to promote the optimal use of resources and to maximize added value in the economy. Second, the QFIC is concerned about the proliferation of regulations, their complexity, and their impact on the industry, because there's the federal regulations and the provincial regulations with regard to GHG emissions. So in total, it's an impact that has been calculated by 2030 by $1 billion for our industry, and that is a burden that will have an effect on the competitiveness of our industries internationally. The third element is that Canada and Quebec are vast. We know that. And access to renewable fuels in the regions is an issue, and it could be difficult for companies to reduce their GHG emissions without having access to biofuels at a competitive price. I think that was addressed earlier by one of the other panel members. The price gap could become significant because we want to make sure the biofuel is used and sustainably. Yes, so fourth, hydrogen, the hydrogen strategy, particularly green hydrogen, is or could be an extraordinary alternative because the CO2 still emitted by the paper mills could be linked to green hydrogen to create biodiesel or other types of fuels. And that is something that would really be a winning solution for Canada. So I will be pleased to answer your questions, and I thank you for this opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll open the first round of questions for 6 minutes each, starting with Mr. Lloyd.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'll get right into it. Dr. Kumar, thank you for your testimony. You're obviously an expert on this issue. I'm just wondering, what is the capacity of, you said that there's a lot of municipal waste that's not being used, forest biomass, straw, oil seeds, things like that. I mean, in order to achieve, what some people are talking about, having 60% of all fuels be renewable, what would need to be the production growth in these various areas, mostly around like canola, wheat, and forest biomass? Well, what would we need to produce in order to achieve that?
Thank you for your question. If you look at, just to give you a perspective in terms of, and I'll focus more on the lignocellulosic biomass, or like forest biomass. If you look at whole of Canada, we are talking about, and this is mostly the the residues, about 21 million tons of forest residue available per year. If we think about typically the production of how much, let's say, ethanol or liquid fuel you can produce, generally 200 liters that you could produce in a ton. Now, these residues which are available today, these are currently in most of the operations are just piled on the roadside and burned to prevent forest fire as a part of forest management practices. So these are not currently used. You look at other, for example, straw. If you look at whole of Canada, we are looking at about 28 to 30 million tons of straw, which are, again, most of these, there are some other uses, but majority of these is left in the field to rot, and it emits CO2. So you do have potential to use these large feedstocks, which are lignocellulosic feedstock. Municipal solid waste, another big one, where you have about 25 to 30 million tons per year.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Doctor. I see your point on that with the straw and the forest products, but wanted to focus now on like canola and wheat and things like that. We've seen the price of canola double this year. It's quite astounding how much it has gone up. If we were to divert this canola from its food purposes or its current purposes and put it into renewable fuels, is it likely we're going to see a much higher price for canola? And what do you think the consequences would be for other sectors of the economy?
So if you look at the evidence, and this is the evidence exists from past, several years, typically there would be some increase in the cost of this. There is a food versus fuel debate all the time in terms of if you divert it, then the cost goes up. And that's why, the more focus on my point is to use the part of the plant which is not used.
Yes. Okay. That's a good point, because I want to kind of flip over to our friend from Covenant Energy. We're talking about new crushing plants in Canada, but you're a farmer. You know the price of canola has doubled. It'll be good for farmers if the price goes up even more, but what will be the impact on canola as a food source if more and more of it's being diverted towards biodiesel?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that certainly we felt we had to address right up front. And so early on, when we were looking at our project, we hired a consultant that's maybe, I would consider him the best in Canada, to be frank, but we brought him on to look at the feedstocks and what was this going to mean for canola, how much is being produced, what do we have? And just to back up a little bit, if you look at what's being produced, there was 4 million tons of canola oil crushed in 2019. Out of 10 million tons of seed that was crushed domestically, there was about 20 million or 19.5 million tons of seed produced in Canada. But the thing is that you have to realize crushers have been at max capacity for the last 3 years, and they've been there sitting there waiting. And so they've had, they've had the opportunity to expand. They've had the crush is there, or the seed is there to expand. So why weren't they expanding? The reason was the edible market is only so big, and to be frank, it wasn't demanding enough demand to signify them to expand. So why did we see these 3 crushers come out just recently with these news releases? Well, if you look at the chain of events, Tidewater Midstream, True North Fuels, and Covenant Energy came out with news releases that we were going to get into the renewable fuels production, looking at canola oil as a feedstock. Within 1 week, Richardson made their announcement. A week behind that,
I do only have a little bit of time, but you know, are you concerned about the rapidly rising price of canola impacting your operations? I mean, if that's going to be your feedstock.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take into consideration, all the feedstock options. Obviously, it makes it a lot tougher when canola prices are going up higher.
Maybe you can follow up in writing on that one. My last question is for Mr. Angelucci. I was reading that, you know, B100, so pure biodiesel, could have a cloud point of 10 degrees Celsius. I mean, obviously in Canada, a cold country, you referenced, I think, Minnesota. I mean, it's not feasible for us to have biodiesel that has a cloud point of 10 degrees. Can you tell us a bit about like what's going on with that? You know, how is that going to be mitigated?
Certainly, thank you for the question. Some biodiesels, depending on the feedstock, do have a higher cloud point, but there are other biofuels that have a lower cloud point. This is part of a transitionary period in alternative fuels. Biofuel doesn't have to be used as a B100, although it can be, but we can use it in varying blends all throughout the year and in different jurisdictions, depending on the temperature. The only reason I bring up Minnesota as an example is it's because on average, it's as cold as or colder than some of our provinces, and they're able to use B20, which has significant reductions for CO2 without any change in infrastructure, without having to go up against the cloud point issue.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Mr. Lloyd. Mr. Simard, you're not on mute. Mario. Mr. Simard, can you hear me? You need to put your mute on. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Mr. Lloyd. Mr. May, you're next for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And before my questions, I just want to thank all of the witnesses for being here today. As I said in the last meeting, it's amazing to see all these companies from across Canada coming together and recognizing the need to transition. And my questions today are going to be directed to Mr. Thurlow from Dow. We know decarbonizing a carbon-intensive sector is not a point of debate for most of us here today. It's something we have to do, and the question is not how we can. The question is how can we find the best way to do it, and not whether we should. Can you comment on the approaches you've heard on addressing emissions reduction?
Certainly, and again, like that is possibly the question that would lead to a PhD thesis. There are quite a few areas that we can talk about. I mean, the first thing that I would say is we're very, very happy to see the change in direction by the federal government on the clean fuel standard. When it was originally conceived, it was designed to also apply to industrial fuels. That would have been incredibly complicated, and it would have exposed the industrial sectors in Canada to a significant amount of external trade competition as a result of the increases in costs there. Another issue that has come up is the prospect of renewable natural gas. And quite frankly, there just isn't a lot of evidence right now that some type of increase in renewable natural gas content in Canada is something that we could either A, achieve, or B, consider economically. I mean, renewable natural gas, depending on the source, can be up to 4 times as expensive as virgin natural gas. The other issue is just how much of it we have, and we don't have all that much. So to see the moves that the government made on the clean fuel standard for industrial fuels, that was a very good idea. And the reason for that is because the output-based pricing system has mechanisms in it to account for competitiveness issues outside of our border.
So you've you stole my thunder a little bit, sir. You've answered you've actually answered 3 of my questions in the first question. I definitely wanted you to touch base on the focus of transportation fuels versus industrial. Do you want to maybe take a moment though just to elaborate a little bit more on that? in terms of, how is Dow? Do you believe Dow can help in that area?
Oh, absolutely. And again, the other thing that I would tell this committee is that the business of chemistry, whether it's Dow or other people in the sector, are going to be incredibly important for achieving Canada's climate change reductions goals. I would say that it's the innovation of new plastics that lead to lightweighting. It is the ability to have these new advanced materials that, will react in different ways under pressure that leads to these significant new GHG savings. I guess the last thing that I'll say from a OBPS perspective is the recent decision of the Supreme Court of Canada does allow for the provinces to continue to design their own systems. And in so doing, they can design a system that is best in class for that particular province.
And you touched on this a little bit as well in your first answer, but do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit more in terms of your views on the creation of a renewable natural gas mandate?
That's a great question, and I don't want to, say that renewable natural gas isn't a climate solution. It absolutely is a climate solution. I just don't know if it is the climate solution. As I said, I just don't know if we have the volumes in Canada to get to a significant mandated requirement. Certainly, the cost would be very, very significant. There is an issue about whether or not the renewable natural gas will have the same phys-chem properties as the virgin product from a feedstock perspective. There should be more study in this area. To say that we need a mandate in this area, I think there just isn't enough fuel in the market right now to create such a mandate.
In respect to the policies or the plans that you may have heard from both the government and other parties, can you take a moment maybe and compare and contrast what you've heard in terms of those proposed plans on this file?
So there's a long history of renewable fuels policy in Canada. It started under the previous government. It's continuing under this one. Like I said, the government's decision to move away from the industrial fuels requirement under the clean fuel standard was a good idea. It makes a lot of sense. Nowhere else in the world do we have this kind of clean fuel standard for industrial fuels. So industry is very, very thankful that decision was made. Does that shift a very significant burden onto the transportation fuel sector? Possibly, and certainly that's something that industry like ours is going to have to look very closely at in terms of developing new options to meet those GHG reductions.
Thank you, sir. And I think my time is almost up, and I'll just take the last couple of seconds here to once again thank all of the witnesses for taking their time for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Mr. May, and you were right on time, so much appreciated. Mr. Simard.
Merci beaucoup, James.
Thank you very much, James. I have a very quick question for Mr. Sam Ray. In your presentation, you talked about 4 issues, and the first dealt with biomass and how to attribute value to the different types of biomass, and you said that it was important to prioritize the uses. I'd like to come back to that. But when you talk about biodiesel and bioethanol or biohydrogen, we could perhaps talk about the prioritization of uses, but when you talk about how to attribute value to the different types, what interests me is support from the government. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. I don't know whether the federal government is supporting the development of that sector. Answer. Mr. Simard, when you look at the bottom line of a company, you can see when it comes to research and development where the company sees the future developing for it. And for us at the QFIC, when we see $35 million was spent over 2 years for the iFit for a conversion and to move the forest industry forward toward new products, well, we like to see that. But when you look at the entire budget that is provided to other sectors, and you will remind me how many billions are being given to the oil sector, well, then we're not quite as happy. So I think that if the government sees a future in biofuels, well, then I think that the funding dollars and I think that's what all of the witnesses here would say, is that the dollars therefore to support the sector should be there so that we can get there. So it's basic. Without financing for research and development and for economies of scale, well, we're not going to manage to do what we want to do. Question, so you need more support. Last week, we extensively discussed the issue of hydrogen, and you mentioned it in your point 4. You talked about green hydrogen. And what I had understood last week from a few witnesses from the department is that there was a strategy that was, in the short term, involve gray hydrogen. But what could the green hydrogen sector represent for the forest industry? Answer. I think that it's very promising. Quebec, like many other regions in Canada, has access to green electricity, and the provinces that didn't have it are starting to get it with the solar energy, and others that are starting to cost less. So for Quebec, with its green energy that can make green hydrogen, well, what that means is that the CO2 emissions of pulp and paper mills, we can take that, those emissions, and combine it with the hydrogen molecule so that we can get biofuels. So we can find hydrolyzing elements in the pulp and paper mills and take this hydrogen to have the biofuel and then strengthen the industry and meet the federal government's objectives at the same time. Thank you. Do I have a bit more time? Yes, I have a quick question then for Mr. Kumar. In your presentation, you talked about the difficulty of reaching the optimum size, economically speaking, of biomass. So could you explain what you mean by that, by the optimum size?
Okay, thank you for your question. When we talk about biomass utilization, so you look at forest or field-based biomass. So what I mean by forest-based biomass is, let's say you're looking at forest residues. You have these in the forest, you have to bring it to a location to process it and convert it to different fuels. Similarly for a straw, you have to bring a straw to a centralized location and then convert it into different types of products and fuels. The challenge is that if you look at biofuels, the cost of producing liquid fuel or gas or any product, that is directly related to what is the area that you are trying to bring it in. So the overall cost of production for lower size or smaller size of biomass facility is much higher. So if you're using biomass, let's say at 100,000 tons, compared to 500,000 tons, the cost of production of fuels or chemicals, that means dollar per liter, is much lower for a size which is at a larger scale, so 500,000 tons. This cost, so the optimum scale, what I meant by that is that the maximum size at which the cost of production is minimum. A lot of these facilities, if you see today, exist on the smaller size, so the cost of production is higher. If you get to an optimum scale, you can bring down the overall cost of production. And that potential is there in Canada because you have large amount of these biomass available. So you could build to a scale where you could get the maximum benefit from economies of scale.
We have about 20 seconds, Mr. Simard. You're on mute, Mario.
Donc, juste pour résumer.
So in order to summarize quickly, Mr. Kumar, that what it means is that we would need vast capacity plants in order to achieve optimum utilization of biomass. Is that right?
The large capacity of the plant. And these plants, it's not the capacity is what we are not doing today. If you look at the forest industry today, you have plants which are at a scale of 700,000 tons or even million tons per year. They're processing that scale. So if you get to a scale with larger
Dr. Kumar,
scale,
I'm going to have to stop you there.
Thank you.
Okay, over to Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you, and I'll continue on with Dr. Kumar. On
Ça veut dire sur le traitement, quand tu as des petits projets.
Mario, yeah.
Mario, you're not on mute. Sorry, I wanted to continue with Dr. Kumar about talking about the life cycle of greenhouse gas footprint analysis of various feedstocks, and you mentioned how the jurisdiction might play a role. I have a company in my riding that has plans underway to build renewable natural gas plants using forest waste feedstocks. I'm just wondering if you could comment on the life cycle analysis for that type of renewable natural gas from forest waste feedstocks, how it compares to, regular natural gas. What is the actual footprint for, say, a plant in British Columbia? If you could come up with a number.
Okay, so typically, if we look at the life cycle of any of these feedstocks, and especially when you're using biomass, so let's say forest biomass, if you're using for producing renewable natural gas, the key aspect which goes into the emissions and which contributes to the overall life cycle emissions. For forest biomass, you're looking at emissions associated with harvesting, transportation, and then conversion emissions. Most of these, the typical delivered emissions up to the plant, you'd look at in the range of about, I would say, 5 to 10% of the overall emissions that you are producing. If I compare this with, let's say, the typical natural gas based emissions, you're still looking at a reduction of 60 to 70% of the GHG emissions after you take into account fossil fuel, which goes into bringing these biomass to the centralized plant.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure if you mentioned in your testimony, but I know you've done some analysis of the possible life cycle analysis for creating biohydrogen from these same feedstocks. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that and the viability of those processes to create hydrogen. We're hearing a lot about hydrogen these days. And
Yes.
if you want to expand on that.
So you could produce biohydrogen from a range of these different biomass feedstock. And when I refer to these feedstock, it could be wheat straw. You could look at the whole tree biomass. You can look at forest residues. And then there are different processes how you can produce these hydrogen, which could based on gasification. It can based on pyrolysis. The typical range of cost of production that you are looking at is about $3 to $4 per kg of hydrogen. If I compare this with the typical cost of natural gas or SMR-based hydrogen production, you're still looking at two to threefold higher cost compared to natural gas. In terms of GHG emissions, if you look at the GHG emissions for biomass feedstock and any biohydrogen compared to natural gas is much lower. You will looking at a significant reduction in those numbers, especially in the forest side. If you consider, people talk about hydrogen from SMR, but they integrate CCS or carbon capture and storage to produce blue hydrogen. So we call that natural gas-based hydrogen as blue hydrogen. If you compare that with the biomass, so SMR with CCS and biomass, you're looking at almost 50% reduction in case of the biomass-based hydrogen. And those kind of, the hydrogen production numbers that we have come up with for a range of the different feedstocks.
And just getting back to the previous line of questioning, what are the availability of these materials to produce hydrogen? How much of the hydrogen market could you take up, or the renewable natural gas? The people that are doing these plants in my riding seem to think they have far more material to work with than they could actually use. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
So if you think about a ton of biomass, a ton of biomass can give you about 83 kg of hydrogen. And so in my remarks, I said that there is significant amount in terms of the million tons of biomass which are available. And like, just as forest residue, 20 million tons. We'll have to do a little bit of calculation, but I think you can look at about 83 kg. So you could still produce significant amount of hydrogen. It's not that you will meet all the demands for hydrogen, but it would be a contributor to the overall demand of hydrogen or renewable natural gas.
Okay, thank you. Chair, how do I have too much time?
You have 20 seconds.
Well, then I will just thank you and I'll cede my time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're moving into second round, 5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Chair. Just several questions, actually, for Dr. Kumar. I've been looking at some of your research, and you're definitely well-researched and know the topic very well. You talk about life cycle emissions, and I guess I have a couple of questions about how you measure a life cycle emission. At what point do you start the process? What time does that process start? Can you just go over how you measure life cycle emissions?
Okay, so let's pick a product. So we were discussing about hydrogen. So let's pick hydrogen. So if you have to produce hydrogen from biomass, and let's pick a feedstock forest biomass. These are forest residue. So first, you have to estimate what are the emissions associated with each of the unit operations, which goes into bringing these feedstock to the plant. What I mean by that is, if you look at logging residue today, the forest industry cuts the tree, drags it to the roadside, delimbs those trees. The limbs and tops are staying there on the roadside, and they take the main stem. These residues, now, if you want to use this to produce hydrogen, you'll take into account the amount of energy that you need in piling this, forwarding this to a pile, chip it, transport these to the plant. So you are including all the emissions which are associated with forwarding, piling, transporting. Right. Now, the conversion emissions is also taken into account when you look at life cycle emissions. So what is the energy going in the plant to produce hydrogen?
Right. So that's kind of what I thought it was too. And so I'm going to ask you for some specifics. So, because one thing that I think as conservatives, we are definitely supportive of renewable, the renewable sector. Whether it's renewable. I think of geothermal as a project that's in my riding. Any kind of way that we can use the natural energy from our planet, without producing emissions is a great thing. But we are also concerned about, the overall, like you say, the life cycle emissions of the comparable. So we have a lot of Canadian natural gas, especially up in my neck of the woods in northern BC. But can you do a direct comparison to natural gas as it comes out of the ground, again with the life cycle emission, a quantity there, to the renewable natural gas? Can you do the comparison for us? Just simple comparison, emission to emission.
The biggest difference comes in is, and you have to take the natural gas, let's say, to produce heat and power, right? The biggest difference comes in is that the combustion emissions that you take, like in any life cycle of these fuels, if you look at the combustion portion of the fuel, that's about 70 to 80% of the whole life cycle. Now, in case
do you have a number that says natural gas produces this much emission? It depends obviously on what it's being used for, whether it's heating or for whatever product you're making. But just from a general, what we use for typically in Canada, we use it for heating our homes. A direct comparison of the emission from a natural gas out of the ground that's sort of a naturally occurring natural gas compared to renewable natural gas.
So some of the number, yeah. So the number for, let's say, the natural gas to power, if I have to give you a number,
sure, that
would be somewhere in the range of about 400 to 430 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And there is a range for that.
And that's natural?
That's natural gas.
Natural,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What about renewable now?
Now, the renewable portion, So if I have to take that, probably the renewable portion would be almost 60 to 70% less, because the combustion emissions, we don't take that into account. Exact number, I can get back to you on that, but the key is the combustion emissions, which we consider for biomass is it's carbon neutral. So whatever you burn during the combustion of renewable natural gas, that is taken up by the trees or plants when they grow over the life cycle. So that's why it's carbon neutral. So that big chunk of combustion emission is kind of considered carbon neutral. So that's where your biggest savings in GHG emission over life cycle comes in.
Okay, so you're saying what would be the number again then? So we said natural was 430 grams per kilowatt hour for natural gas. What would be renewable then as a number?
Very, very quickly, sir.
I'll have to say 50 to 60% less than that.
Okay.
Thank
Can
you.
you give us for the committee?
Sorry, Mr. Zimmer, that's
okay. Thank you.
you're out of time. All right,
That's
thank
no
you.
problem.
All right, Mr. Weiler, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also like to thank all of our witnesses for a really fascinating discussion that we're having today. First questions I have are for Canada Clean Fuels, and really interesting proposal that you put forward about the blenders credit. But my question for you, you mentioned that the price gap now stands at about 15 cents right now, where it would be competitive with other fuels. And I'm wondering why you're proposing this blending credit for biofuels, because of course the proposal and the regulations and the systems that we've been looking at are really kind of agnostic of the type of fuel types right now, but really focusing on the absolute emissions reductions that we can get through that. So why focus particularly on a blender's credit rather than things like the clean fuel standard that would reduce those for all different types of inputs?
Thank you, Mr. Weiler. Great question. So, for us, just because I want to preface it by saying, just because we're advocating for one doesn't mean we're not advocating for others. Like I said, I think our transition is full of a bunch of different innovative technologies to get us where we have to go as a nation, and ultimately to get ourselves to net zero. The reason that we push for biofuels in particular is biofuels offer a way to use all of our existing infrastructure. So the diesel trucks that are out there and the diesel tanks that are out there and the diesel stations that are out there can all use a biofuel blend. So it's a very simple and ultimately cost-effective way per ton to reduce or to get megatons of emissions, just because we use so much fuel. The other benefit of a blender's credit is that if you make the cost of the end product cheaper, then all of the other pieces of the chain fall into place. You can get financing for a plant to build it because they know there's offtake for their product in a profitable way, and so low cost financing for green alternatives, especially now, abounds. And so it's one piece of the puzzle. It's something that we are focused on and that we know well, and we've seen work. In the U.S., they have a blender's credit. It helps function for both producers and discretionary blenders and upstream oil and gas players, depending on who wants to use it. And it's the reason that their average blend level for biofuel is about twice what it is in Canada right now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next question I have is, I was hoping you could, transportation is almost a quarter of our emissions. It's the second biggest source right now, and collectively with oil and gas, that's over half of our emissions for our country. And I was hoping you could speak to the importance of having a long-term, steadily rising price on pollution as a mechanism to really ensure that you have the investment being made into some of these renewable and cleaner alternatives like biodiesel to be able to reduce emissions from our highest sources in our country.
Thank you. And another great question. Having something that steadily rises and is predictable is one of the best tools that business folk or that the government can do to encourage business investment. People, and business leaders, they like certain things. Sometimes it falls in their favor, sometimes it's a little bit out of favor, but having that predictability allows them to plan and adjust for that. Having a steadily rising carbon tax tells everybody we're putting the price and the social cost of conventional fuels onto the cost of that fuel, but we're not doing it so quickly that Canadians are hurt by this carbon tax. And it gives other folks who are in the production or blending part of that economy the time and the foresight to see where that break even or where their fuels become cost effective. And in doing so, you help create a thriving renewables industry.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask the same question for Covenant Energy, because you mentioned that your plant is going to be coming online in a couple of years to produce some feedstock from canola for hydrogen and other biodiesels. And I'm wondering what would happen for your business and your business plan if the clean fuel regulations didn't go into effect at that time?
Yeah, bottom line is the reason why there hasn't been any renewable diesel plants pop up prior to this is because of the uncertainty with the clean fuel regulations. Just to be very clear, we're dealing with being kind of a first of its kind facility here, and you see what happens, I guess, when you look at the United States. Their policies put in place, California, Oregon, even Washington State now following suit. Policies put in place, and policy drives investment. The policies there, all of a sudden you're seeing an explosion of renewable diesel facilities going up. And so to have any uncertainty on the Canadian side or any wavering is really going to hurt investors to have that confidence to move forward with projects like ours.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Weiler. Okay, over to Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say hi to my friend Bob Larocque, even though I don't have any questions for him. But I would like to come back to what you said, Mr. Samray and Mr. Kumar. Mr. Kumar, when you talked about a large capacity plant, I had a discussion on another study on the forest industry, and I was told that a biorefinery, a large capacity, is about $2 billion. That's what it costs. And Mr. Samray was talking about the iFit program with $35 million over 2 years. That's not enough, clearly. So what I'd like to know from Mr. Samray and from you, Mr. Kumar, is whether a project that costs $2 billion could represent a biomass processing plant, a big plant, and perhaps more specifically for Mr. Kumar, when processing lignocellulosic biomass, is it just for biofuels, or can you make other products that could replace petrochemicals in the plastics industry, for example?
Mr. Kumar? Okay. So I'll comment on what the key aspect in terms of the investment which is needed. I mean, any of these that you will do, it needs to be a partnership between public and private sector. And then only you can go to these larger plants. The specific numbers I can get to you in terms of what that would entail. In terms of specifically your second question related to, if you could repeat your second question, which was related to the optimum scale. Mr. Simard?
Oui, dans le fond, est-ce que 2 milliards de dollars, ça peut...
I was wondering whether $2 billion would be the necessary investment to have a large capacity plant.
We'll have to look at in terms of the investment, but I think that the scale that we are talking about, if you look at these large forest industry plants, they are at the same scale. So the amount of investment that is needed to build these plants would be similar. You are processing 500,000 tons of biomass per year, which has been done, and then you do invest these into these forestry plants. So similar type of investment would be needed. The other question I remember is in terms of the biorefinery, where you said only the ethanol could be produced. But I think, like, the concept that we think in terms of processing.
Dr. Kumar, I hate to keep doing this to you, and it seems like I'm picking on you, but I'm not, trust me, but I have to cut you off again. We have to stick to the time limit. So we'll have to move on to Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to turn to Mr. Gustafson of Covenant Energy and pick up on some of the sort of food versus fuel questions. I guess when we talk about, the use of canola around the world, some goes to fuel, some goes to food. But I'm just wondering, as canola prices go up, what are the pressures on farmers on the Canadian prairies to convert their cropland, say from wheat to canola, once canola just gets too good to resist? Is that a situation where we could see a reduction in wheat and other food crops being changed over to canola fuel crops? I have a sort of the same debate in my riding, but it revolves around changing from, peaches and apricots to wine, and people complain about that. So, well, some people do. So I just wanted to know what the dynamics of that are for farmers on the prairies.
Yeah, so first off, I'll say both the provincial and federal government have been working with associations like the Canadian Canola Council, the Sask Canola Council, Canadian Canola Crop Growers. So one of the things that is helping to provide the supply that's needed for the transition for using canola oil into renewable fuels is the vast amounts of research and development that's going into producing new canola varieties, better yielding. Farmers are really good at adapting. We're really working hard. There's tons of new advancements in machinery to help do better farming practices. And so as far as the debate goes on taking acres away from other wheats and different things like that, farmers are pretty good stewards of the land. You know that you can't grow canola back to back to back to back to back. It just doesn't work. You have to implement a crop rotation, and there's only so much you can do before running into disease problems trying to really push canola. So farmers are going to steward it. Even now with canola being a extremely high price historically, you see, there's a modest increase in canola acres, but it's not through the roof. It's not abandon ship on everything else and put in canola, because the bottom line is there's only so much you can do to push that narrative. And so farmers are good. And I mean, along with that, wheat prices are looking good. Lentil prices are looking good. So there's other avenues to keep pushing on those other varieties and the other, commodities as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kennings.
I wanted to say hi to Bob Larocque too. I was going to ask him a question, but
he's very popular for a guy who's not answering a lot of questions. I'll say hi too, Bob. Okay, over to Mr. McLean.
Can we all say hi to Bob?
Good. Yes, we should.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question here of Mr. Kumar. And witnesses, thanks very much for coming. But Mr. Kumar, I think we're getting somewhere with your research, and I hope you can commit to giving us some pretty clear ideal outcomes in written format after this. But let me ask, just for prodding here, I know my colleague, Mr. Simard, talked about a $2 billion bio plant. And my colleague Bob Zimmer actually talked about getting into the actual cost of this and the life cycle emissions. So if you're talking about building correct me if I'm wrong, a $2 billion plant that processes 500,000 tons per year of biomass, if that's the ideal here, can you give us all in how big a mass of land you're talking about culling that from, and what you're talking about as far as the CO2 emissions associated with the building of the facility itself, if that's included in your life cycle analysis first, please.
Okay, so thank you for your question. If you look at, let's say, half or 500,000 tons of biomass, that's equivalent to about 1,500 tons of biomass per day processing. Now, in that area, it will depend what type of feedstock you are using to support that plant. If you are looking at, for example, forest biomass, the whole tree biomass, if I think about that, the yield is about 84 dry tons per hectare. This is from a good site. So you can get 84 dry tons from a hectare of land. Now, if I go about the footprint of supporting this, so per year you are about to kind of using this much biomass, you are looking at a range of somewhere, a radius, or I should say about 50-kilometer radius for getting this biomass. Again, depending on the yield, where you are locating it. That is.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm sorry, I have to be more quick here. And the $2 billion facility that's presumably going to be built of wood, steel, concrete, what are the CO2 emissions that are built into that?
Yeah, the construction emissions are the lowest component of emission over life cycle. So you are looking at even less than 1% of the total life cycle emissions that you are considering if you compare it with a fossil fuel plant. So the overall is very low component. The major would be harvesting, transportation, and getting it to the plant, the whole feedstock.
Okay. And what percentage of the fuel mix, if you're talking about natural gas mix mixed with renewable natural gas, would this plant be able to supply, given the ideal sizing and costing of this?
So in terms of the yields, I'll have to get you the number, but typically you are looking at about the yield goes as 30 to 40% kg of renewable natural gas per kg of biomass that you could produce. So 0.3 kg per kg of biomass, renewable natural gas that you could produce from biomass. But to get to 500,000 tons, that's what we need to do.
So how much of the gas could you replace with a renewable, given the facility you're talking about?
But to how much to replace that will depend on what is my baseline to what I'm comparing with.
I appreciate that. If you can give us a model that we can go on there, that would be really instructive, and I thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Angelucci, because he had some good comments here. I want to ask him about the biodiesel. He talked about it being cost comparisons with natural gas, the price gap between biodiesel and regular diesel, 15 cents versus 3 cents is written here, but let me ask you, does this include the cost of excise taxes that are incumbent on diesel that aren't imposed on biodiesel?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that's supposed to be an apples to apples comparison on the when you're comparing biodiesel to regular diesel. So sort of taxes.
No tax on biodiesel, but excise tax on real diesel.
Yeah, so factoring in some of the benefits that it already has, we're seeing still that kind of a gap between biodiesel and diesel. Now that fluctuates, and to be very truthful, diesel and biodiesel are always fluctuating.
So if we took the government extra costing into diesel, how much would they compare as far as one versus the other?
If I understood the question correctly, it's what you see there. It's about a 15-cent spread between a zero blend and a B20 blend.
So the zero blend does include?
I'm going to have to stop you there, unfortunately. Mr. Lefebvre, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci tout le monde d'être là. Again,
thank you, everyone.
Amazing, really good panel of witnesses, and just to show us how in Canada, the ingenuity as we are tackling climate change and looking at economic opportunities, what this represents. And so I really want to thank all of the witnesses that are here today and the work that you do. I'll ask Bob a question. Bob, ça va bien? Good to see you. And so we've heard a lot about certainly food versus fuel, which I find very interesting. At the same time, though, certainly talk about supply and demand, right? Because that's obviously drives certainly the economy. As we like I said, we're looking at this as an economic opportunity. It's a necessity. At the same time, as how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? So your members are obviously some of the largest fuel producers in Canada. So how do they see this economic opportunity and really their role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions at the same time?
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Merci beaucoup. Yeah, just to put in perspective, just for the clean fuel regulation, and that's like B10 if you wish, or bio-based 10% and ethanol at 15%. We need billions of liters in Canada by 2030, anywhere from 6 to 10 billion. So we will send a brief to the committee about those numbers of liters versus percentage and cost that we talked about. We're taking this very seriously. We're looking at every single option. Hydrogen is also an option for us. Electrification is another one. I mean, we're seeing also with charging stations in our sites, but also looking at co-processing, which is actually putting crude right into our refinery. And that's something we haven't talked about yet. But there's Burnaby, a facility in Burnaby, BC right now doing this. They want to double it. Tidewater is also talking about that in their investments. So this is significant, Paul, and billions of dollars are going to be invested. We already saw 1 billion in 2 facilities in the last 3 months, and we'll see a lot more.
So that means that the industry, the businesses are seeing a big opportunity to do this. So now, I guess my question is, we always look at what's going on in the U.S. Obviously, we see what they're doing and how it shapes and influences us. So if we don't do this, if we don't go down this route, and I think we all agree that we should be going down this path, but certainly the U.S. is doing this. And do we see them being able to export some of their product here and be able to benefit from our markets because we're not, we're not doing enough on our side?
Well, there's two things happening. It's both ways. So one of them, if we don't increase and accelerate the production of bio-based products in Canada biofuels, we will have to import it from the United States. No questions asked. That's a done deal. We're importing right now. So we have a huge opportunity to build in Canada. Number two, what we are building in Canada, if the life cycle analysis are not quite the same, if the incentives are not the same, our Canadian products are going to go to the United States. We will sell to California. So we need to get it right. We need to get the Canadian policies and incentives aligned. And we also want to make sure that we keep it in Canada. And on that note, I think we're on a good track with the Low Carbon Fuel Fund, with the Clean Fuel Regulation. It's the details in it that are critically important in the next 2 years.
And those are forthcoming. And I know there's a lot of consultations that are being that are being had with your industry and a lot of stakeholders. So do you believe that we can be self-sufficient in Canada when we talk about the biofuels industry, that we have enough to do, or do we will need to import no matter what?
At this time, I think I'll be honest, I'm optimistic. I think we can do it by 2030. Because I'm hopeful in what's happening in the next 2 years in conversation we're having, even with the other people like Covenant, for example, which are outside our sector, but we're all working together. I think we can get there. But one thing, it has to be all feedstock. We need to get forestry, we need to get agriculture, everything to get there.
And so would you say maybe as we are doing this report, certainly of having more of a network, or certainly more, because I don't think there's a lot of organizations focused on feedstock for biofuels right now that just looks at that end, or maybe I'm wrong. Certainly that is more of a national organization that is looking at feedstock. How do we get it? How do we certainly advocate to make that part of it is part of the supply chain, but having a voice within the supply chain. What are your thoughts on that?
We're actually taking some lead, and we're launching a transportation task force, to be honest with you, with the automakers to make sure they can accept the fuel, with the feedstock suppliers so they can provide it to us, with all the blenders, all the biofuel producers. And we're going to have our first meeting in June. So I would suggest strongly that this committee recommend a transportation task force, because we can only do it together as a supply chain. We can't do it individually.
I 100%. Am I done? Too bad.
Unfortunately, you are. Thanks, Mr. Lefebvre.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Patzer, over to you.
Thank you very much to the witnesses for coming. I'm going to start quickly with Mr. Kumar, and just wanting you to finish up a thought on your public-private partnership that you're mentioning there. And I just want to just ask simply, why? And does it not make sense on its own, even with these regulations?
I think in the beginning, when the industry has to kind of grow, and I especially focus on the lignocellulosic biomass industry, has to grow, initial incentives will kickstart the economy. And then later on, once the economy is going, you might need the government might not need to do an investment until the market will pick up. But that's kind of what my initial thought is.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on over to Covenant Energy, and it's great to again to see some local production happening here in Saskatchewan, and in particular, I like the fact that you're looking to build your plant obviously right where the crops are being grown. I guess the question that I have to start with is just some simple math, like how many tons of canola are going to be needed per year, and how many liters of fuel is that going to produce?
For our facility in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at a 6,500 barrel a day facility. So that's 6,500 barrels a day of feedstock, which produces about 5,900 barrels a day of fuel production. And I mean, it's give or take whether you're producing Arctic grade renewable diesel, summer grade, or sustainable aviation fuel. But That works out to about 350,000 metric ton of canola oil if we were using 100% canola oil as a feedstock. And that would produce in the ballpark of 325 million liters of fuel.
And you think we have that production happening right now? I mean, I know there's been a lot of questions about, are we going to be replacing food stock that's being grown compared to what's going to be used for biodiesel? But you're absolutely confident that you have the canola production right now, in the region or across the province to meet that demand?
Absolutely. Right now, in 2019, there was 4 million tons of oil produced, as I said. 50% of it went to the States and 25% of it went offshore. And we only use 25% of it here in Canada. So not only is there oil to be used here in Canada, but looking at these announcements with Viterra, Cargill, Richardson, and looks like possibly even others coming out, there's going to be enough oil to warrant this supply need for renewable diesel production.
When you, I think you were talking about a feasibility study earlier there, and I'm just curious to know, like, what is the pricing per liter? So for a consumer, for a farmer that's looking to, say, fill his tanks, what's he going to be paying per liter for this renewable diesel when it comes time to actually get it onto market?
It's a little bit more complex than just stating a number. Right now, the price is pretty much driven off of what's happening in California, and there's not even a real good tracker to follow that price. If you want to find out the price down in California, you basically have to take the rack price of diesel, add in the D4 RIN price, add in the California credit, and then add in the blender's tax credit, and kind of back into a price that way. So, I mean, it's a lot more complex than just stating a number. And certainly for our company, we're working out and showing all of the economics behind the pricing, scheduling, and what it's going to look like, and how it's going to move alongside even something like the veg oil market.
Okay. And one thing too, like obviously with canola being, or sorry, not canola, with the coal phase out that's happening in there because of this government, it's obviously good to see the jobs that you're going to be making here and producing here. What's the opportunity to expand in this and to make this an even bigger, a larger scale operation than what you have right now?
Yeah, certainly. We would be foolish to not take into consideration the ability to increase and to move alongside the market as it grows. Obviously, it's a little bit more risky just coming in. The CFS hasn't even been fully rolled out yet, but certainly we have plans to look at increasing in size, adaptability to different feedstocks, looking at production and marketability all the way across from the Canadian fuel producers and suppliers right down to a home for it in the US to export market. So, I mean, we haven't even talked about the spin-off effect of all the other industry that's going to be affected, like the processors, the logistics and shipping industry, farmers. It's going to be a widespread impact.
But one last question then. So if
you're right on the button there, Mr. Pastor,
okay.
Unfortunately, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can hear my alarm to prove it. Who's next then? We have Mr. Saray for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses. My first question, Jean-François Samray, it's for you. I also wanted to say that our honorable colleague, Mr. Simard, mentioned the last meeting and the meeting today that the government has a gray strategy. That's not what we have. I wanted to clarify that. But I wanted to ask you, Mr. Samray, to talk about green hydrogen in our strategy. What can we do to enhance the strategy? Can you give us specific recommendations? Answer. Well, I think that it's good to look elsewhere. And if I look at Finland and what they've done with the UPM paper plant, and if you look at their financial results, well, it's a pulp and paper industry, and it was having difficulties, and the government decided to support them with the research and development. And the main product on their balance sheet is biofuels. So it made it possible for them to consolidate their investments in their sector and consolidate their forest industry activities. So really, when it comes to hydrogen, I think that there are more and more regions in Canada that could get electricity, obtain green hydrogen, and combine it with biogenic carbon from combustion, either from the combustion of wood in the plants or be it cogeneration with the biomass, be it carbon that comes from biomethanization as well. So there's methane that's produced and there's about 40 to 60% that comes out. It's biogenic CO2. So you have a unit that produces green hydrogen that way. So these are all things that should be looked into, and I truly encourage you to read an article by the Nobel Prize or the William Lord House on the Climate Club, and to see where Canada could set its sights and where it could draw an advantage rather than get isolated in the market. We have advantages. We have R&D, we have the biomass, the territory, and I think it's up to elected representatives to provide policies that support this, and I think that that's what the study today will lead to. Thank you very much.
Earlier there with my colleague Paul Lefebvre. So I want to give you an opportunity when we talk about the low carbon fund, when we look at some of our strategies. You mentioned about some of the details because we're doing consultation as we speak. So I wanted you the opportunity here to provide the committee with some of your recommendations and to some of these funds that we're providing here on the renewable side.
Yeah, so just to start quickly, for the low carbon fuel fund, for example, very good start. And I know Jeremy, Mr. Rotzer was talking about public partnership, and this is just to get us over the hump with the provincial plans, the CFR. Number two, the low carbon fuel, we're really, really pushing the federal government to consider the full infrastructure, not just the production plants. It's needed, but we also need to fill the terminals, and we need to provide some help to the retail because they need to upgrade their equipment to be able to sell the B10, B20, B100 we heard today. So we need to set the infrastructure. So that would be one recommendation that I would make. The other thing that everyone also needs to, two comments, the Net Zero Accelerator Fund under the new, the $8 billion, the $5 billion that was top up. There's some opportunities here either for pulp and paper, for refining, for other sectors, cement, to work together. Wouldn't it be nice to use forest residue, bring it into our, blend it off and have a cement plant use a biofuel? And now you've got three sectors that reduce their emissions. So that's what I'm talking about, is ensuring that the government plan on biofuel is aligned across Environment Canada, National Resource Canada, and ISED. So those would be recommendations I would make.
No, thank you. And Mr. Thurlow, you expanded a bit about this earlier in some of your responses, but I wanted you to further talk about, in probably 30 seconds I have left here, what is our government's decision to focus on transportation fuels as opposed to the industrial fuels? Can you just expand on that, please?
Certainly. So that was heralded throughout industry as a good decision. The primary reason it's a good decision is because the carbon price under the OBPS will allow for competitiveness to be taken into consideration, and energy intensive and trade exposed industries will not have the same regulatory burden under that price as they would have under a dedicated we'll call it clean fuel standard for industry. I mean, the other thing that I would add to something that Mr. LaRocque said, natural gas is a very good substitute fuel for a lot of the other solid fuels that have a much higher carbon intensity.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Surrey. Mr. Simard, back to you for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, James.
Thank you, James. I'd like to come back to something that Mr. Samre said, and perhaps Mr. Kumar could also answer. But earlier, when you were answering my friend Mark, you said you were talking about where Canada can go with this, and Mr. Kumar was saying that we have significant potential when it comes to biomass. And what I'd like to know is how government action can get in motion to support that significant potential. I'll give you an example, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong. I know that in the 70s, we didn't have the technology to make the oil sands viable, economically viable. It took a lot of research and development, a lot of government support for research and development to make the technology viable. So do you think that there should be similar government support to develop the technology associated with our biomass potential? Answer. I think it would be in the best interest of everyone. On the one hand, and there's the example I gave of Finland with UPM. So that consolidated an existing sector, a sector that is needed to build housing, because you need wood to build housing. And so that consolidates that, and you protect sectors. And truly, by funding research and development so that sectors can diversify, that's a way of protecting them. I think it's a win-win for Canada, given how much forest cover there is in the country, and adding in bioenergy as one area of diversification in the value chain.
And if I can add to what was said, if you look at the potential, so I mentioned there is large potential. And that potential comes from some of the feedstock that I talked about, which are not being used. So you have forest residue, straw, which is currently not being used mostly. But also, if you look at just the amount of biomass that we cut, the whole tree, in different provinces, there are different regulations. But if I go back to and think about annual allowable cut, how much is allowed to cut every year? Typically, if you look at over the years, 10 years, 15 years, you will see that that is still is about 50 to 60% of the total annual allowable cut. If there are regulations which makes it mandatory to use a small percentage of that to use for biofuels or bioindustry, even making these residues, making them available for bioenergy in the industry. If there are some kind of regulations which helps in doing that, what we will do is it will help in getting the secure supply of biomass.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar.
Biofuels.
You're going to go away from here thinking I'm an awful person, but I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Cannings, over to you.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Saray ended up asking Mr. Larocque the questions I had lined up for him. So I'm going to turn back to Mr. Gustafson and go back to canola. I'm just trying to drill down on this, what the roots that canola takes, or what's the end uses of canola that we produce here in Canada. Large proportion, as you say, is exported. Do you know what the end uses of that canola are? The export canola, the canola we send to the United States or Asia. What proportion of that is used for fuels versus cooking oil, that kind of?
I don't know the stats off the top of my head. I do know that anything we export does go into the edible market and renewable fuels. Largely, it has to do with how it's refined at the different crushers. Obviously, if you're looking at an RBD canola oil, that's largely going more into the edible markets. And most of the stuff that went offshore was a crude super degummed oil that was bound more for the biofuels market. So it depends on what type of oil and where it was going, but certainly those are the two main destinations. Yeah.
And you also mentioned aviation fuel in your remarks, and I remember a news story a couple of years ago. I think it was Qantas did a flight from North America to Australia, or I forget the details, but they were using aviation fuel, I believe, made from canola, or at least a blend. And someone did a calculation of how many acres of farmland had gone into that flight. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on the prospect of using canola for aviation fuel in terms of how much production we'd need to make a meaningful dent in the aviation fuel that we need or will need in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the first things to say is that, and something I'm very proud of, Canada is one of the best canola producing countries in the world, if not the best. And Saskatchewan is a very huge part of that canola production. We produce a lot of it. We have the capacity. As I said, the government is trying to push to go from 10 million tons of crush capacity up to 14, 15 million tons of crush capacity. We're looking at trying to, you know, add an extra 2 million tons of oil to the idea. And so I do think that canola oil can play a very big part in the production of sustainable aviation fuel. Certainly some of the tests that are going on are proving to be very effective in emissions reductions. And when you look at the way the industry is going, I mean, you have announcements from massive companies like Boeing saying they're going to have 100% renewable aircrafts by 2030. The bottom line is the industry is going very aggressively towards sustainable aviation fuel, and we feel that canola oil can play a very big part of that.
Thank you, Mr. Gustafson.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Cannings. Okay, over to Mr. McLean.
I'll take the second half of this if Mr. Patrick can start off, please.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll be split my time with Greg. So yeah, back to Mr. Gustafson again here. Just two quick questions. How many acres every year is it going to take to meet that demand that you said for 1 year's worth of fuel from your plant?
Again, I don't have that number. I could very easily figure it out, but I don't want to waste your time with my calculator here. But
yeah, if you can submit that to the committee, that would be great. That would be really helpful in our report. And my last question is just simply, you know, if the fuel that you're making is superior to conventional diesel, and when I'm looking at your website, the stats that are on here, they look really good. Why do we even need the clean fuel standard if it's already a superior fuel on performance merit alone to a conventional diesel?
You know, it's a process to get it produced, and I mean the bottom line is to compete with the economics of producing fossil diesel at such a large scale that they're doing it is very tough, and so we need the government support. We need the clean fuel standard to bring in those blending mandates to require that fuel be put in there, and to give that home and to kind of help break into the industry of looking at having renewable fuels blended in. And certainly, you know, in certain areas, it does look like they're going to straight renewable diesel. I mean, you see what's happening in the cities of San Francisco and the cities of Oakland. They're converting entire city fleet vehicles to 100% renewable diesel and seeing, you know, significant amount of emissions reductions. But the bottom line is, the scale that fossil diesel is used right now in Canada, it's you know, there's just no way that we can touch that sort of production at the time being.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
In continuing, Mr. Gustafson, let's pretend for a moment that the world's going to eat the same amount of oil seeds going forward here, no increase, no decrease, and you're going to produce a bunch of oil seeds for production in fuel. So I think that means you're going to have to break more land. Is this going to be a lot like what happens down in Southeast Asia, where they've deforested great amounts of natural land in order to make palm oil?
No, to be the short answer, but I'll tell you why. Just looking at the Keep It Coming strategy that was put out by the Canola Council of Canada and the federal government, they're looking to hit, as my report shows here, they're looking to hit 26 million tons of production, up from 20 million tons of production in the next 5 years, and they're looking at doing that over the same amount of acres. And largely it's because, as I said, the yield is expected to go from 39.8 bushels per acre up to 52 bushels per acre. And largely, again, that's due to better farming practices, better products.
So, gotcha. More fertilizer as well, would you say?
I don't know about more fertilizer, better usage of fertilizer for sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Do I still have time, Mr. Chair? I'll go to Mr. Larocque for a quick question. Mr. Larocque, you talk about $20 to $30 billion required of investment. I hope you mean that's industry investment over the next little while in order to get us up to speed on what we need. Mr. Larocque, how well have we done in actually producing our own biofuels since the 2008 mandate to get to 5%?
If you don't mind, I will that question answered by Mr. Dave Schick, who's got a little bit more information than I do on this one.
Thanks very much for the question. I think we've seen a lot of growth. It's the federal policies that really drive the economics to build these larger scale facilities. And I think we're seeing under the low carbon fuel standard in British Columbia, like the CFR federally, the carbon intensity natured policies are driving changes like we've seen.
Mr. Schick, it's a very direct question. How well have you done in meeting the last standards that were imposed in 2008 to get to where we are now? And how much are we importing as opposed to producing here?
I don't have the specific number. There's a significant amount being imported. We can do better in manufacturing these products in Canada.
So we've failed as far as meeting our own needs here. We import over half of our biofuels in the last 13 years.
I don't know if failed is the right word, but we can do better for sure.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McLean, and you're right on time. Ms. Jones, you are going to finish us off for the question portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the panelists today. It's been a very informative discussion, no doubt. As you know, the Government of Canada has worked very hard, both with many of you that are here today and those across the country in the industry sector over the last few years to look at federal initiatives for developing new carbon and low carbon and renewable fuels. We like to think that we're hitting those programs in the right direction. You're the people out there in the industry that's transforming this. What would be the recommendation that you would leave our committee with today? And feel free, anyone, to start the reply.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me to
please go ahead.
Yes, well, I think it was quite clear, and my fellow witness were at the same place. I mean, we need some support, financial support, to bring it to the market, and a clear regulation in order to facilitate getting capital from the market. These are the two things, and it will give us the proper pace to when to phase into the new production plan. But definitely financing support and a clear regulatory framework.
I would say let carbon be carbon. Any reduction in carbon is a reduction of carbon anywhere in the country. Don't limit yourselves to limiting carbon. Think of other environmental impacts, and there are lots of them.
Thank you. Mr. Larocque, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just do not pick a winner. Allow every potential lowest cost abatement to reduce carbon, and please keep in mind what's happening in the United States. This is very, very important for this committee.
Thank you. Okay, are you finished, Ms. Jones? I think we're pushing. You're on mute, by the way.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, because we're pushing the limit. So let me just say, and committee members do not leave after when the witnesses leave. We have a couple things to take care of, but I just want to say thank you to all the witnesses. Incredibly interesting panel, very informative. As I say, every meeting, we never have enough time because we could spend so much more discussing all of these topics, but it is what it is, and we are very grateful. So appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Mr. President, thank you to the members.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Chair.
everybody.
Everyone.
Okay, so just very quickly, two things. So the subcommittee had a meeting on Monday at the conclusion of our meeting, solely for the purpose of discussing future timetabling. The subcommittee report was circulated on Tuesday, I believe. We need to adopt that because it deals with what we're going to do on Monday, which is reviewing S3, which was sent to us from the House last Friday. So, Madam Clerk, do we need a motion to adopt the subcommittee report?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Richard's moving. I see his hand up. You're moving that we adopt the subcommittee report. Okay. Why don't we just do a show of hands? Dane, Bob, you got your camera on? Bob, can you just throw your camera on, please? Well, there he is. Okay, all right, great. So the report is adopted. Okay, so on Monday then we will be doing clause by clause on S3 pursuant to the report. The agenda will be circulated almost immediately after this meeting is over, I suspect. An email went out yesterday, which all of you should have received, requesting that any proposed amendments be sent in by yesterday at noon. None were received. Can I assume that that means that there are none?
Just could you ask that again? Because there is
Yeah.
a dissenting report, to be clear.
On S3?
Oh, sorry, not S3. I'm sorry, my mistake.
Yeah. So no, sorry, Bob. On Monday, we're going to be doing clause by clause on S3. There's only 3 clauses in it. Yeah. But if there was any amendments, it was we had asked that they be circulated by yesterday so that people could have advance notice of them and that they could be translated.
We have no changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. That's what I saw. I just wanted to make sure everybody saw the emails. Okay, so we're good there. So, sorry, that means your time's up, Yvonne. Okay, and then the only other thing is next Friday we have witnesses who are going to be coming in the agenda, or the notice of the meeting will go out. One of the witnesses, Mr. Norman Goyette from H2V Energy, has responded by saying he would like to attend, but he would like to bring his lawyer with him. Now, I'm not sure if he misunderstood what the nature of the invitation was, but the rules do provide that he can bring his lawyer with him, just the lawyer can't answer any questions or ask any questions. I think he's probably just being overly cautious, or maybe he just wants him there for his own purposes. In any event, unless anybody has any strenuous objection, I'm going to tell him that's okay.
James,
yeah, go ahead, Mario.
I have a meeting with him. Perhaps I can call him and let him know what the purpose of the testimony is. But I can perhaps call him and say I don't think a lawyer is necessary, but he'll do what he intends to do in the end.
Yeah, I'll let him know he's free to bring him, but if you want to have that conversation with him, tell him he doesn't need one, put it that way. Anyway, okay, so we're good there, and then I think
we're very curious now, Mr. Chair.
I will admit I am too, Mr. McLean, but
what does he know that we should know that he doesn't want to divulge? That's what I want to know.
People are going to really prepare for next Friday now. Anyway, I think it's just a misunderstanding, but anyway, we'll get it cleared up and we'll go ahead for next Friday when we get back to this. So I think that's it. And so Monday is S3, and then next Friday we'll get back to the study. The only other thing is glad to see Mr. Lloyd's got his young child there. Brings a positive element to the meeting. So thank you. And on that note, I just want to wish everybody a good day, a good weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Meeting adjourned.
Bon weekend tout le monde. Bon weekend.